Hello, Kelly here with Kelly's Soroka Life and the home of the Broom and Moon Coven. So today is my last video in my 4x4 series for the month of April. So during this month, I have been studying 4 different magical items, and I have worked with the herb or plant aloe, the crystal rhodochrosite, the deck, the Penumbra Tarot, and today I have a book review of the book that I read called Blood of Blood and Bones by Kate Fuller. Now, this was a very interesting book. It was not at all what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was more of a report kind of style, or more of a just a history of how things like blood and bones and sacrifices and things like that have been used in history, and in because they have been used in different ways, in different, many different ways. Sacrifices, using animals, we know that people were sacrificed in ancient civilizations, and I thought it was going to be more of that history kind of featured on witchcraft and how it works into that, or just kind of like an overview of that, the more that more dark side of magic. And I think it's important to know about that because first of all, people a lot of times assume that witches do this kind of thing, and that have satanic practices, and do these kinds of things. And there's always new videos and news reports and Facebook posts and things like that about witches in particular, and other pagan groups and beliefs that have mistaken beliefs in them, mistaken reports about what witches do. And it's been like that for, as in recorded history. And so I thought that that was more about what this book was about. But it's really more of a grimoire of using the dark moon and tapping into dark magic. And again, some of it is uncomfortable. And if you are uncomfortable with blood or bones or animal parts or things like that, then this is probably not a book for you. But on the other side, I thought that it was I wanted to read it because, again, because of knowing and just the association with witchcraft that this kind of magic has, but also to have an informed opinion about it. So when people ask me, what do you think of curses, and what do you think of hexing somebody, or what do you think, isn't that what witches do? And some witches do and some witches don't. But if you ask people of other but if you ask, a tarot reader, do you read reversals? Some do, some don't. And it is a personal choice. It's things that people have opinions on, and I wanted to have an opinion on it, and I wanted to do some research. And she does have, it's very, I think, well researched. It's not overdone. There's not too much of background in it. There's not like notes on every page like some other books that I've read, but there is really interesting things in it. And I think that she really did her research and really looked into, when she talks about different aspects of dark magic, that she has researched it and looked at history and how that plays into how we can do it today. And the biggest thing I think with the whole book is that there is definitely a message that there is dark magic, and dark magic exists just like we have places in our lives. And the moon goes dark every 28 days or 29 days. And we have times in our lives when we are working through something that is dark, when we're working through a dark night of the soul, or we're working through a tower moment in our life where things are shaken, our beliefs are shaken, and we all have that in some way. And some of us are going through that right now. Some of us are, you know, it's coming for some of us, and some of us have worked through it and are, facing other dark moons. But the fact that doing this and doing shadow work is very, very important. And in her message is definitely, before you do any of these things, no, you have to think about it very deeply, and it needs to be a decision that comes from a very well-reasoned place, and a place that you have done your own shadow work first, so that you're not just off cursing people and getting mad and saying, this person is doing this, and not really understanding. Not that there are, on the other hand, not that there are times that there are people who are mean and abusive and do things that are not, are just not, they're just not good people. They have addictions, they have made choices in their lives where it makes it really hard for other people to be around them. And that is, again, but again, that this author cautions you about those situations, and using these kinds of things as, as a last resort, or when you're very sure that this is what is needed. And the great thing about reading a lot of these is that it was very much shadow work for me, because I saw some of the things in here that I thought, this is me. I do this, and I don't need to do this spell for somebody else. I need to do it for me. And there was one, particularly about transmuting, a spell for transmuting jealousy. And I thought that's a really good one. And I'll talk about that one in just a minute. But I thought that was really a really good one, and something that is, when you're feeling that. And because I can't imagine that any of us have not felt jealousy, and it's hard, and it's something that can hold you back, and it's something that can be detrimental. And so, working with that, and working with your own shadow work, and knowing where you have work to do is really good. And that was a big, one of the big premises in her book is to do the work on yourself first, which is, good for anything, good for any kind of witchcraft specifically, but any kind of work that you're going to do with yourself. And if you are having problems with another person, kind of getting to the root of it, and then being able to think clearly about the next step and what you need to do. So the book is Of Blood and Bones, working with shadow magic and the dark moon. So she kind of surrounds the book with the dark moon, starting with the dark moon. And we don't talk about the dark moon a lot, because we just kind of go from the waning crescent moon, and then we go straight into the new moon. And and a lot of times we call the new moon that time that is the dark moon. And so, technically the new moon doesn't start until the the you can see that little bit of light, but there is that 2 or 3 day period where the moon is dark, and that can be very symbolic. It can be a time of working different ways that we use witchcraft, and different ways that we can do shadow work for ourselves, or and if we wanted to do, one of these spells in here, it's a good time to do that too. So she kind of starts and ends the book with this dark moon, and kind of takes us through these different aspects of working with dark moon and working with dark magic, and different ways that you can do it. And so I'll tell you about the book, how it's broken down. So it's broken down into 4 parts. So part 1 is shadow work and the dark moon current. So this is her premise, is that if you feel, especially if you feel like that you're in this dark moon current for yourself, if you are in a shadow place, if you're dealing with a hard situation or something where you feel like that it's very, you're in that difficult place, then this might be a book you want to read, even if and I agree, and I think even if you don't do any of this work, just reading it and being able to look a lot of these things in the face, and facing some of these shadowy things, can kind of give you very much, can give you a different perspective or a new perspective. So doing the shadow work in the dark moon current, and then she moves in part 2, blood and bones. And this is the part, these next 2 parts are the more, what I was kind of expecting from the book, the more historical way that blood, bones, and different kinds of dark magic like curses and things like that have been used in history, where they came from, and how we can use them today, or not use them today, but how they can be supportive to us, and we can use them in our own ways. And most people now, I think, would, and she talks a lot about substitutions, like in history, what things might have been used at different times. And in all, I think all ancient civilizations had their own way of sacrificing people, of sacrificing animals. And of course, we wouldn't do that today, but looking back to see what was it that they were trying to figure out? What was at the root of the sacrifice, or what was the root of using blood? What was the root of using bones? And there are, a lot of people that use bones today in bone casting, and doing readings today. And so you have to feel like, how comfortable do you feel with it, and what is your personal craft, and what is your personal take on witchcraft to use these things. And so she talks about them, and always gives you, with all the spells that she writes about, always gives you alternatives that you can use. And then part 3 is the forbidden craft. And so this is talking about different things that people assume, I think, that witches do, and a lot of us may do, but we do it in a different way. It's not what, popular media portrays it as. And so these are, things that we use as witches: puppets, the little dolls that you can make. And of course, when you see those in 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 movies and things like that, they're in TV shows, they're usually, these little creepy dolls that people are sticking pins in. And it is not, and it's not, and while there is a use for that, there's a wide array of ways that you can use a puppet, and that you can create a puppet. And she talks again about the history of that. And that's just, another example. And then she talks about cursing and because that is very much, a topic of that you have to know about, and you have to be able to speak to your own practices for that. And then she does go into the history of sacrifice and how it's grown. And one of the things that she says about sacrifice is that as we have developed and as we have grown as or changed as a society and maybe noticed things and know different, know more things, about science and how the world works, that we do different things as sacrifices today, which I think is very true. And so we can look and see, what are sacrifices that we can do now that show our appreciation to the divine, or our appreciation to a god or goddess, or the universe, that or the earth. How can we use sacrifice? And she has a lot of good ideas, like doing a technology fast, which I really want to do, and or doing a water fast where you just drink water. Doing, how different religions use fasting today as different ways of devotion. And so there is a lot of history there, and a lot of I think she did a really good job of researching these areas to give not only her opinion, but kind of the background on it as well. So that's part three, the forbidden craft. And then part four is looking death and rebirth in the face. And one of her points in the book is that we have, as a society, really gotten away from death and gotten away from death as a part of the larger cycle, and how we are really afraid of death because we think that that's the end, that there's nothing, and we don't know. And although we have all of these clues here of what we think happens, I mean, we know what happens to trees. They lose their leaves, they die, but the leaves are reborn. And we plant, a bulb in the spring that sprouts, that grows and then dies back, but it's underground, for several months and then comes back again. And so there's a lot when we're really separated from death and dying, and we're not with people when they die, and we're not there to help them move on when they die, which is very, very valid. And one of her these last chapters are about that, and about if how we can work with death, and working with the death of somebody that we know, or working with the death of a pet, especially with a witch, working with the death of a familiar, because that is, a very special kind of relationship. And we have different kinds of relationship with different people, and we can, of course, work with ancestors and work with people who, have moved on. And I, I was lucky to have a very close relationship with both of my grandmothers when I was growing up. And when they died after, having very long, full lives, it was very sad, and I do miss them, and I miss having them here, but I also know that they're right here. I feel like that they are with me, all the time. And there's probably not, a day that I don't, speak to one of them. And just because I feel like that is what happens after we die, that we are there and we move on to a different place in a different way, but we still have work to do. And that's just my personal opinion about death. But I feel like that. And in the book, the author goes into, kind of her take on death, and how we can be be better at it, and how we can be you know, and talk about it and ask about it, and that it's not a taboo subject that to not ever talk about or think about. So that is the four parts of the book. And like I said, it starts out kind of moving from, how, and you can use this in that dark moon and, create a dark moon altar and have a special time every month that you connect to these things. And maybe this is when you want to do a a kind of your own kind of sacrifice, or maybe this is when you want to do some ancestral work, or when you want to do some shadow work for yourself. And so then going through some of the spells, one of the spells that, well, first of all, she has a meditation that you can do, and I would definitely, if you get the book and do, some of these meditations and grounding and centering things that she says to do before you move into doing any of this work, even if it's doing it for yourself. So I'm just gonna kind of ground and center us right here because I do want to do a tarot reading that she put in the book. And this was really good because again, one of the premises of the book is to do your own shadow work first before you move into, going out and cursing someone. So this is, and she says, this is the Dark Moon Tarot consultation. So you shuffle your cards, and this is the Deviant Moon Tarot. And then you draw some cards out and you ask, what is my role in this situation? Or what am I supposed to learn from this situation? So if I were maybe doing this spell that I'm going to talk about in a minute, this spell for transmuting jealousy, then I might say, what do I need to know about jealousy? What do I need to know about how I relate to jealousy, and how, what are the ways that jealousy is coming into my life. And so I drew the cards, and so it says there's four cards. And so card number one represents the current issue, your experience, or the general tone of your life right now. So this, I got the moon. And this is kind of telling me that this is something I need to listen to my intuition, that and this is probably a good book for me to really to tap into right now and to look at, because there's a dark moon coming up in a few weeks, and there might be something that I want to work with it then. And so this card number two represents me and the role in my situation. And so here I have the Two of Swords. And the Two of Swords is making a decision. And so I'm making a decision about this, about working with this area of jealousy. And it apparently is something that I should be doing, that I should, be working on and making that decision so that I can see, other ways to look at the situation. And then card number three is the most important card in the reading. These are your fears, triggers, or ingrained behaviors that are stirred up by this particular problem or even causing it. So here I have the Queen of, so I can get it into focus there. Queen of Wands. And so the Queen of Wands is very creative, very fiery, but also needs some emotion. And so jealousy is like that. Jealousy is this feeling or this underlying emotion that just kind of explodes on the outside, and is it and may and something that you feel emotional about, and then it's kind of it becomes destructive on the outside. And so that when I look at this spell for transmuting jealousy, then I can kind of keep that in mind and say, how can I deal with this internal emotion and then and not have it explode on the outside. And then card number 4 indicates how I'm going to grow from the experience. So card number 4 indicates how you're to grow from the experience. So this is the Ace of Wands. So as I do this spell and as I'm learning more about this situation of jealousy and how I'm going to do it, then afterwards I'm going to grow because I'll have this new perspective. I'll have this new way to grow in the future. So I can look at situations and that once I might have thought would make me very jealous, then I know how to handle it. And so that I just wanted to give you kind of an example of the things that you'll find in the book. So you can start out doing some grounding, some centering, and just kind of bringing your presence in, doing a reading like this, and then you can move on to one of the spells that you're really interested in. And so she says, a spell for transmuting jealousy. And this is from the book. While having ingrained jealousy issues tend to run more deeply than something that can be solved in a single spell, this working can aid you in your journey to overcoming it. And so here, the gist of this spell is to plant some seeds in a pot or somewhere that you can watch them grow. And over the time that the seeds are growing, you can start to, work on and start to kind of do the shadow work for yourself to figure out the source of your jealousy. Do some tarot readings, do some meditations and some journalings. And then you will say, and this is from the book as well, I give these seeds over to the darkness, take my pain and absorb it into the great cauldron to be transformed. As these seeds grow and break out of their shells, together we will grow and blossom into something beautiful instead. And I thought that was just a very good, it's just a great type of spell in here. And it's one that you can definitely use for yourself for shadow work. And there's all kinds of other sh spells in here. Um, and they are there's a one here that is a worm spell to end a relationship. So you use a worm to end a relationship. There is let's see, um, let's see if there's some other ones. There's a simple binding spell. So if you're trying to stop something, some harmful behavior for uh, against that somebody else is doing to you, there's a binding spell, and she talks specifically about binding versus cursing. And so you can find that. You can find, a curse. You can find a puppet binding spell. There is, let's see, a sulfur spell to break a habit. So this uses sulfur like you would find in a match, and you can use that to break a habit. So, there's lots of ways that she talks about how in history that curses and omens and sacrifices and animals and oracles have been used, and how we have kind of and how we can use them and adapt them to today. So it's definitely a great book, and I definitely recommend it if you are interested in, going deeper into something that is very shadowy, that is can be very confronting, and but is, I think, a part of our lives, because we all have shadow work and we all have things that we need to work on. And there may be situations that we really do need to to cut a cord with someone, or we need to stop someone's bad behavior from affecting us. And that is, again, it's a very personal choice, and something that you have to do as and ethically and morally, and think about the situations, and think about, maybe there's different ways. Once you've kind of done the background work, maybe you've done the shadow work for yourself, and see there's maybe a different way to handle the situation. And so, again, definitely something that I recommend, and I enjoyed it, and it's something that I am going to, do some work. Especially, I think the first thing I'm going to do is just do maybe like around the dark moon, do maybe like a technology fast, and so have a day where I just, unplug, or do something else. And so, just there's lots of little things that I think that you can adapt to yourself and the way that you do your own witchcraft. All right, so that is it for the my book review for April, and all of the videos are already up for everything else. The video on Rhodochrosite, the video on Aloe, and the video on the Penumbra Tarot. And so all of those are there. You can go back and find those. I'll have some new things coming up in May, and I'll have those out very soon. But speaking of witchcraft, the Broom and Moon Coven is open, and this is my space of witchcraft on the internet. And I have opened the coven on a platform called School, Skool, and it's a great platform. I'm really enjoying using it, and it's a place where you can come in and chat. And if there's things you have questions about, like this, things that you are wondering about, or things that you want support with, or a way, to do, you have a tarot reading that you have a question about, or anything that has to do with witchcraft, we have a free community. You can come in, you can chat there, you can post in the closed community, you can message me, and so there's just lots of goodness going around in it. And we are in May, we'll be doing fairy magic, and so just like with fairies, there's lots of great things about fairies, but there's also shadow work to fairy magic. So again, it's this, kind of, it all ties in together, and it all ties in, and we all have these cycles that, we work together. And we will be working with the new moon. We work with the full moon and the new moon, but you can definitely come in and, work with the moon cycles as well. So it's all beautiful magic, and looking, at what all that witchcraft can be. All right, so the all the links to everything that I've been discussing will be all down below, and the link to join the community at the Broom and Moon Coven will be below as well. And thank you again for being here, and I will see you again next time. Bye.